Welcome to the Inner Work Community Podcast, which aims to provide you with language, tools, and guidance in your journey towards personal and relational wholeness. We'll discuss topics ranging from psychology, spirituality, tantra, leadership, sexuality, polyamory, and more. My name is Michael, and I'll be your host for insightful interviews with thought leaders, practitioners, and experts who have a thing or two to share about living an integrated and meaning-making life. Whether you're looking to deepen your connection with your interior world, overcome challenges in your relationships, or expand your psychosomatic horizons with fresh perspectives and paradigms, the Inner Work Community Podcast offers a safe yet challenging space for dialogue and introspection. This is all a gift, so let's go enjoy it together. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. When the student is truly ready, the teacher will disappear. This is a quote accredited to the 6th century Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. In the Gospel of Thomas, there's a saying that reads, "For God's kingdom dwells in your heart and all around you. When you know yourself, you too shall be known." So what do we do when the teacher that we've longed for, the person that we've long desired to guide us or to companion us, to walk with us, to be our comfort, what do we do when that person disappears? Have you had an experience of this? Have you experienced someone who held such energy and agency in your life, and then suddenly they're not there? They aren't carrying you anymore. What's that felt like? What are the stories that you've told yourself about that experience? What are the stories that you told yourself about all that led up to that experience? Was it all fake? Was it all a sham? Were they really who they said they were? Perhaps they were this monster this whole time. Maybe you've lost teachers or guides to death, right? Someone died and you really depended on them to carry parts of you, to affirm who you were. That could be your mom, your dad, grandparents, aunts, uncles, coaches, teachers, friends, anyone. And suddenly all of this energy they brought into your life isn't accessible anymore. When we have a teacher like this, they kind of form this mirror. They are this reflection, right? And it doesn't feel like they're a mirror for you. It feels like they're this external entity that really completes your life. But ultimately, these individuals serve, in terms of your own growth and wholeness, they serve as mirrors. They simply reflect back to you what feels too valuable to carry within yourself. I had someone like this. I've had a number of these individuals in my life, most of them men who I esteemed as having reached some sort of pinnacle, right? They were living the life that I hope to one day live, and by being associated with them, it kind of raised something up in me. It brought a greater consciousness. They were men that reflected that back to me. They didn't steal my gold. They didn't try to just extract what was in me. They truly guided me into areas of my life that I otherwise might not have ever found. But all of them have gone. A few of them have died. A number of them, suddenly the relationship shifted to where I wasn't as magnetically drawn to them anymore. And there was a lot of judgment, I think, about myself. Like, what's wrong with me? Is there something? Is this part of like an avoidant attachment, right? Like we got too close, and now I want to pull back, and I don't want to get more intimate or more dependent or interdependent. But ultimately, there is this kind of acknowledgement that they guided me for a time, and they guided me to where I needed to go, and suddenly the energy between us, the energy that was drawing me to them, wasn't there. It just didn't draw me anymore. So I want you to reflect on that. Where have you experienced this kind of magnetic draw to someone, and then suddenly that magnetism doesn't exist? It disappears because they either died, they left, they kind of left you, or you left them, or you just kind of like faded. It's just kind of like, we just kind of lost touch. And I want you to think about that in terms of Lao Tzu's quote at the beginning. When the student is truly ready, the teacher will disappear. This is imaged very popularly in Star Wars, right? Where Luke Skywalker meets Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Obi-Wan guides him. I'm not a big Star Wars fan, by the way. I mean, I like Star Wars. I'm just not that into it, so it's amazing that I can pull the characters' names up right now. But Luke Skywalker needs Obi-Wan, like the embodied, physical, present Obi-Wan Kenobi. But you remember when Obi-Wan is struck down with the lightsaber, right? And just kind of the cloak drops and he's gone. But he's not, right? He shows up, his voice shows up now as this internalized voice within Luke. And it's kind of that popular moment where it's like, Luke, use the Force. And it's coming from within him. And this is a big part of what I want you to consider is when the teacher disappears, it doesn't mean that what disappeared is no longer necessary. It means that it's internalized. Something that used to live outside of you now lives inside of you. In stories, myths, fairy tales, Star Wars is a modern myth, right? Anytime a guide or teacher or elder dies, it truly is an image of psychological integration, right? The wisdom, the knowing that they carried for often the protagonist was simply external. They held it for them until the protagonist was able to hold it for themselves. They carried that gold, to use Robert Johnson's language. The Jungian, psycho-spiritual Jungian author Robert Johnson talks about it as inner gold, right? He says, when we awaken to new possibilities in our lives, we often see it first in another person. A part of us that has been hidden is about to emerge. But it doesn't go in a straight line from our unconscious to become conscious. We project our gold onto someone, and suddenly we are consumed with that person. That is a sure sign that something is changing in us, and we are projecting our gold onto another person. So our gold goes out from us, not from our unconscious to our conscious self, but it goes from our unconscious out onto another. Could be a person, could be a group, could be an idea or a movement. And it goes out there first, and we invest that gold into this external entity. And then if it goes well, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong there, if it goes well, we will slowly integrate that gold back into ourselves at a pace that is appropriate for our development. It won't come all the way back all at once, and at the same time, it should come back to us over time, eventually. So I want you to take inventory of who are the guides, the teachers that have disappeared in your life, and how have you framed that story? How can you reframe that story to understand this as really something that was yours all along that slowly got integrated? How have you become more whole after that relationship? I want to invoke here as well the story, something that Jesus went through, right? Because for me, the biblical stories, particularly the gospel stories, are full of symbolism. Symbols really are these, they're imaged, right? When you think about a symbol, you think about an image or an experience, but they image our lived experiences. And they're so energetic, and I think any sort of religious text is full of these. And so my primary symbol library is the Bible. And so I pull that back in, and I think a lot of people listening, that's probably true of you too. So you'll find if you go back to it now, if you've had enough space from it and it's not too triggering, you'll find, oh, there's a lot of gold in there that I can work with. And it may be triggering to some degree, but if you can stand that, then you can do some work too. So this is from the Gospel of Matthew. It says, from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must suffer many things and that he must be killed. Peter, one of his disciples, took him aside and began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. Jesus, if you remember, goes on to rebuke Peter and says, this is where he says, get behind me, Satan. And in the Gospel of John, Jesus actually says, but very truly I tell you, it is for your good that I go away. Unless I go away, the Spirit, right? Think Obi-Wan going from flesh to this kind of internalized spiritual being. Unless I go away, the Spirit will not come to you. But if I go away, I will send the Spirit to you. Okay? Unless the teacher disappears, the student can't really ever be ready, because the student is always depending on something external. And that's not bad. It's just a developmental step. It's a place in the journey. But that gold that you see in another person, that goodness, that veneration that you have of this speaker or this teacher or, God forbid, pastor, that could be where you're at. But unless that eventually metabolizes back into you, it stays out here, and you truly never become whole. And the only way to experience that wholeness is to be in proximity to that external person or group. And this gets into a whole other realm of like how cults and fundamentalist religious organizations develop. When there's no way to internalize what has been projected out. And there are whole systems that actually thrive off of people investing their gold and never getting it back, right? I would go as far as to say a lot of evangelicalism, what I like to call the common Christian myth, depends on people investing their goodness onto God. That's kind of how it's stated, right? Like there is no your thoughts are not God's thoughts, your ways are not God's ways. All of these messages, these verses that we've internalized to essentially filter out our inner gold, our inner agency, so that then we project it onto the divine and leave it out there, right? Like this is like a weekly practice for a lot of church communities, laying down things at the foot of the cross. That's literally called worship in a lot of communities. And in doing that, consistently laying down our goodness, our thoughts, our ways, our agency, our ability to make decisions for ourselves, to think critically, to have emotions. By laying those down, we are essentially projecting them out and never owning them. And then if you think about like personality cult organizations, where the leader, the lead pastor, or the CEO, whatever, kind of has this venerated God likeness to them. that people show up in order to hear from this person. Even with the best intent, these sorts of leaders are unconsciously extracting the God-likeness out of people and absorbing it for themselves, because the whole system is built on that. The whole system of that church or that organization is built on people essentially investing their gold and never getting it back. In the worst cases of this is very much methodically intended. Leaders that actually take, whether it's the emotional or the spiritual projection, they take on the ideal parent for people, knowing that they are vulnerable for that. They attract that, and then they use that to manipulate and coerce, abuse, and neglect people that follow them. So perhaps this has happened as well. So if you have left one of those organizations and you find wow, obviously you can't go back into that, and it's not like they truly were actually a guide for you, right? They weren't a good guide like Obi-Wan that helped you find the force within. They were someone who said, no, I have it. Or they would say God has it, but ultimately, psychologically, it was them. It was their community, their organization. And you left that, but it's very possible that you still have gold back there. You still have this absolute abundance that got invested that isn't bad. It was manipulated and coerced out of you. You don't have to go back into that space physically to get it back, but there might be some work there. There might be some work to look at, what did you give them? What did they take from you that is rightfully yours, that is actually yours? And can you, at this point, enter back into that psychological space and start bringing that home, claiming that gold, right? This is, a lot of the work I do as a shadow work coach is actually helping people to uncover their authentic spirituality. And anyone who has been hook, line, and sinker invested into one of these kinds of communities, and they've given so much of their gold. I mean, literally, given so much of their tithe, even this 10% idea, which is total bullshit, first of all. But if you've given so much to these kinds of organizations, that was good. What you had and gave, or what you had that was manipulated and extracted out of you, was good. And it's not gone forever. It just needs to be consciously brought back. There needs to be some work to name, right? To give name, label, image to what it was that you had that no longer feels connected to you, that feels lost. And start to, through those words and through those experiences and metaphors and images, you're encapsulating the energy that was invested and bringing it home, right? It gets contained, and now you can bring it back into yourself. And that is when you can start truly developing your authentic spirituality. Because that spirituality, that way of engaging the divine, isn't authentic. Really, I don't think it's authentic to anyone, because it's built off of a system of, it's very much a capitalistic mindset of, having one person or a couple people at the top benefit from this kind of total projection, this collective golden projection, right? It's taxation without any sort of reflection back. You were taxed, and you received no benefits from it that actually had any value. Because a true teacher reflects that back. That's what a true teacher does. They are a mirror. They don't. I had a fellow guide, shadow work. She calls herself an emotional ninja. She's amazing, and I actually got to sit in a retreat with her recently, and she said, I don't call myself a healer, because to say that I'm a healer communicates a certain dependency, and that's what we don't want. We don't want to be dependent. This idea of carrying gold. Think about a kid. I have a 6-year-old son. Well, if he's got something really heavy, he can't carry that. He would ask me to carry it, and I would carry it very easily. In fact, this just happened. I just moved into this beautiful apartment here, and we were carrying things in, and I asked him to carry this bag, which for me would have been nothing. I could have put it on like my pinky finger along with everything else I was carrying, but for him it was too heavy for the distance we were walking. And so I carried that for him. But I won't always need to carry that for him. I didn't carry that for him because he is inherently unable to carry that for himself. He's just developmentally not there. And the best teachers recognize that. The best teachers, the best guides recognize when someone is able to carry something. And if they're not able to carry that, but it's an essential part, that teacher will kind of hold that space. In Robert Johnson's book that I quoted earlier, it's called Inner Gold, and the subtitle's Understanding Psychological Projection. He uses the phrase carrying the image of God, or holding the image of God for someone. And he talks about his experiences in India of people asking him, Will you be the image of God for me? Will you carry the image of God for me? And how uncomfortable that is to hear, right? Will you be the image of God for me? But what's being asked here, and I'm not an expert in Indian culture or Hinduism, but what's being asked here is, hey, there's something about you that hooks something in me that I need, that I don't currently have access to. And so by someone being the image of God for you, they become this carrier of the God-likeness that is emerging. It's starting to emerge. If it wasn't starting to emerge, it wouldn't be hooked by this person. So this person really serves as a mirror, but they also serve as like a tactician, I don't know, someone who is skilled in slowly helping you draw all of that out that's inside of you. And then the best teachers know that that's not theirs, and they hold it for you to pick up. And then your job, and this is often some of the most painful work, is your job is to pick it up. Your job is to come to that point where you don't depend on them to carry it for you anymore. And that moment will always be stretching, but you have the capacity. You have the capacity for that kind of stretch. That's ultimately what we're talking about, is when you have that capacity for that stretch, you'll be able to carry that. Connie Zweig, in her book Meeting the Shadow on the Spiritual Path, actually says, she talks about discipleship being a stage in human development. So within Christianity, but also a lot of other religious traditions, this idea of a disciple is kind of like what you're supposed to be like forever, right? You're supposed to be a disciple of a person, in Christianity, you're a disciple of Jesus, but disciple is referred to from someone that is, in their 20s to someone in their 80s, 90s. You're always this disciple, or you're a child of God, right? Language matters. And if we consistently over the course of our lives think of ourselves and refer to ourselves in these kind of infantile or developmentally regressed ways, certainly like a child, but then beyond that, being a disciple follows this teacher, right? And if the student is truly ready, the teacher disappears. That's what does happen. And Jesus is a perfect example of that. And he tells them, hey, I'm going away. And Peter's like, the hell you are. And then Jesus literally says, get behind me, Satan, right? There's this idea that in that moment, Peter takes on not the voice of Satan from this kind of evangelical sense, but he embodies the shadow narrative. He brings the shadow forward and embraces it, by saying you will not do this, is this kind of hidden narrative that I have to depend on you. You have to stay. Otherwise, who am I? If you're not here, I don't know who I am. But what Peter's about to go through, and what we all go through, is this disillusionment with the teacher, with the guide. And suddenly it's us. Suddenly it is our work. Suddenly it's our journey. It's our responsibility. It's our obligation. And those moments wake something up in us that maybe we've never considered to be a possibility. And it's a terrible moment. And it is an absolutely beautiful moment. So if you feel like, yep, shit, that's me, I got to do some work here, I invite you to reach out. Email me, go on my website, links are all here. Schedule a 20-minute discovery call. Let's look at shadow work together, right? Shadow work is a broad umbrella term. It's essentially whatever is hidden in your life, what's in your hidden life, and let's look at it. Let's play with it. Let's see what we can do with it. I encourage you to reach out, and especially if it's in this work of reclaiming gold that you invested into a religious community or a religious leader or teacher, and feel really disillusioned emotionally, psychologically, spiritually around that loss or that betrayal. And I'd love to journey with you, see what kind of magic we can create together. Okay. Enjoy, drink water, take care, and I look forward to hearing from you. Hi, Michael here. Hey, seriously, thank you for listening and engaging the Inner Work Community Podcast. I trust today's episode gave you something to reflect on or illuminated a new trailhead to your hidden life. If this episode resonated with you, you can subscribe, share it with your people, and leave a review. That really helps spread the word and boost our online presence in this digital world. Remember, growth is not a straight line, and we're all figuring it out as we go. I'm grateful to be in this unfolding and excavating work with you. So until next time, be yourself. You've got a good self. And remember, it's all a gift.